Howdy y'all, welcome back. Today, we have an incredible dive into the first images of the technology-driven old world structure that was known as the Crystal Palace. This existed in England. Many of you may be familiar with this structure, but today I've decided to peel back the proverbial veil and dive into the history further, looking for the oldest images I could find of this immense and remarkable structure. Before we can get into the architecture itself, we first must address the current narrative. Essentially, the first Crystal Palace was built in Hyde Park to house the entirety of the Great Exhibition, the first World's Fair, designed to introduce the Anglo-Saxon world to the discoveries and technology being founded around the world. The entirety of the building seems to have arose by chance, as we're told over 60,000 panels of glass were manufactured by the Chance brothers to cover a frame of over 990,000 square feet. This was the most complex glasswork in history. Miraculously, scouring museums and forums searching for photographs of the original Crystal Palace, I found but a handful. Nearly every depiction of the original palace in Hyde Park is a sketch or drawing. The photographs that I could find from the original palace, which we are looking at right now, mostly seem to focus on the interior. However, we can still see so many anomalies within the image. It's as if we're seeing a showcase of inherited objects from the destruction of the feudal system, or the progression of the old world ruling systems into the new world system that seemed to be ordered by banking. I digress, but the flashpoint for the narrative and this history appears to be hidden within the World's Fairs. Now listen to these official dates. On March 15th, the Ides of March, 1850, roughly just over 1 year before the Fair of 1851 was to open, an executive building committee began accepting submissions for the fair's building design. According to these official documents, the building had to be temporary, simple, as cheap as possible, and easy to build in rapid time. Look at the structure of the Crystal Palace. Does it adhere to any of these requirements? Furthermore, another date, May 1st, 1851, the 75th anniversary of the founding of the Illuminati, which began on May 1st, 1776, was chosen as the official opening day for the first World's Fair. Again, are you beginning to understand what the World's Fairs truly were? The English Committee had received some 245 entries, including 38 international submissions from Australia, the Netherlands, Belgium, Hanover, Switzerland, Brunswick, Hamburg, and France. All of the countries mentioned had their greatest architects submit their designs for the Great Exhibition building in England. And I find it so fascinating that when we look at the root or the origin to these countries, it appears that mostly all of them have ties to the Germanic tribes and to the Holy Roman Empire. But I digress on that because none of these designs were chosen. We're told around 1850, a horticulturist by the name of Joseph Paxton had become well known to the upper class of England, creating examples of smaller glass greenhouses somewhat resembling the Crystal Palace on garden properties around the country. He was then invited to a meeting with the commissioner of the building project, Henry Cole, on June 9, 1850, and by June 11, 1850, Paxton had finished his blueprint design. It took until July for the project to find a manufacturer, being the engineering firm Fox Henderson and Company, and the project officially began construction by August of 1850. The massive structure was supposedly then built in less than 8 months. Just 8 months to manufacture the parts and erect the building in time for the exhibition's opening, the anniversary of the founding of the secret society we all know. Paxton was able to design and build the largest glass structure in history entirely from scratch in less than a year and completed it on schedule and on budget. It was built with the largest panes of glass ever manufactured up until that time. We're told because the entire building was scaled around similar dimensions, it meant that nearly the whole outer surface could be glazed using hundreds of thousands of identical panes, thereby drastically reducing both the production cost and the time needed to install them. More than 1,000 iron columns supported 2,224 trellis girders and 30 miles of guttering, comprising 4,000 tons of iron in all. Over 5,000 men worked on the project. However, we see none of them in these construction photographs. Again, we're taking everything we read in the current narrative with a grain of salt, but we're told that the Crystal Palace was built around trees that already existed in Hyde Park, which were allowed to continue to grow in the greenhouse-like setting. Could this line in the narrative be an indication if this structure was in fact old world? Could it have served as a massive greenhouse, even during abrupt winter events like the Little Ice Age? The final dimensions were 1,848 feet long by 456 feet wide. Absolutely massive. The entirety of the roof was lined with a new invention known as the Paxton gutter, essentially a precursor to the gutters that most homes are built with today. The life of the Great Exhibition was limited to only 6 months, after which something had to be decided on the future of the Crystal Palace building, the largest glass building in history, and by many accounts, the largest structure created up to that point during the Industrial Age, then sat abandoned in limbo. A holding company was created, of course, and proposed that the edifice be taken down and relocated, piece by piece, to a property named Penge Place. This plan was approved and began in 1852. At this time, today's photographer, Philip Henry Delemotte, was commissioned by the Crown of England to document this process of the reconstruction of the Crystal Palace. Those are the photographs we're looking at today. Somewhat remarkably, the entirety of this collection appears difficult to find. I located roughly 30 of these images for you. Unlike the first palace, these will be actual photographs, but even with this, the second palace, nearly every construction photograph I could find shows the base layer, the foundations, the frame of the building already in place. It's as if the highly trained individuals came in, laid the foundation down, laid the frame down, meticulous and quickly, but the rest of the process, which we are seeing photographed, seemed to take quite a while. The Crystal Palace Company also paid for stereo or 3D photographs to be created of the Crystal Palace upon its completion. Within 2 years, the rebuilt Crystal Palace was complete, and on June 10, 1854, Queen Victoria again performed an opening ceremony in the presence of over 40,000 guests. We actually have a photograph of this, which I will include right here. 2 railway stations were founded to run to the second Crystal Palace. In 1868, the world's first aeronautical exhibition was held in the Crystal Palace. In 1871, the world's first cat show, exactly what it sounds like, similar to a dog show, was held inside the Crystal Palace. In 1895, we saw the Crystal Palace house the African exhibit, introducing the world of Europe to the many mysteries of the African continent. And in 1905, a similar exhibit was held to introduce the European world to indigenous America. In 1911, the Festival of Empire was held to mark the coronation of George V and Queen Mary. During the First World War, the Crystal Palace became a command and training center for the Royal Navy, and after the war, the Crystal Palace was converted to a massive museum. After the Festival of Empire and following World War I, the Crystal Palace began to lose popularity. Eventually, the history says that different individuals proposed ideas to renovate the deteriorating structure. However, on the evening of November 30th, 1936, just before the onset of the Second World War, the Crystal Palace burnt down. We're told over 85 fire engines and 400 firefighters attempted to fight the flames, but simply couldn't extinguish the glass and metal iron building. All that was left standing after the fire were 2 water towers and a section of the north end of the main nave, which was too badly damaged to even be saved. All was lost. How was this possible?